And the rear one, both of them now. Well, mate, the hair's getting a little bit tiresome now. Since I burnt out my electric air pump, I thought it might be a good idea to get that foot pump. It's a bit of a workout in the morning, and of course, what's the day? Today is the 29th of August, and in this country this year, spring came quite early. And I noticed that the plants and stuff grew really quickly, really early on in the year. And I remember saying then, maybe the plants know something we don't. So yeah, things are starting to turn a little bit autumnal, and leaves are starting to brown off. It's yeah, it might be an early autumn. Let's see what happens this winter. The summer, I absolutely love the summer for work. You know, you can go to work in shorts and t-shirt and stuff, but yeah, this morning shorts are kind of like on the limit. Right, let's get to work and see how the day's events evolve. Let's do it. Well, I'm certainly glad I'm not working out there today. Okay, so let's have a re-evaluation. This is condemned plastering part 2. Let's have a quick look at the stuff we're going over here. It's been one coated unsuccessfully, I'd say, and left in a condition that was unacceptable for a plastered wall, at least. This has all had one neat coat of SBR. All this bone dry master plaster, and we've got this one to do, and as soon as we finished in here we've got a slightly bigger one over there to do. Now how are we going to unfold this? You see the ceilings are quite low, which is handy because we don't need a hop up or anything like that. I've only given this one coat of neat SBR. The C-Cap, S-I-K-A, SBR. Some SBR brands are a little bit stronger than others. Another primer you could use would be PVA, but you'd certainly need more than one coat of PVA, I would say, since you have to dilute it anyway. SBR is really good because it's thin enough to actually really get into that porous surface and soak right into it, rather than just creating a skin on the surface, which you don't really want, because if you use PVA and it was too thick, then you get the skin on the surface and you don't get a very good adhesion. You're back to, you know, an unstable surface again. So we're not too sure exactly how these walls are going to go. Are they going to need another SBR? From the video yesterday that we did, some people were commenting and saying, oh, you'll definitely need to give that another coat of SBR. And I haven't got any on me. I might have a bit of PVA in the motor. So what we're going to do, I think, is to get a grasp of what's going on, because we haven't tackled one of these plastered walls just yet. Yesterday we just did a load of prep, got all this SBR, so it has had day to kind of cure that SBR, and we did the ceiling and we got the beads up, etc, etc. So what I think I'm probably going to do in the way of unfolding this room is start off with a decent amount on the regular old plasterboard, and we know exactly how that's going to go, don't we? So because we do it all the time. So I'm probably going to knock up enough just to get this small shower room done, and maybe the outside, and then just as a tester and an experiment, I'm going to pick up this one wall here as well, because it's a small wall. I get the impression, look, because I lick my finger and that's not changing colour, which gives me the impression that that is actually quite well sealed. But we will find out. So I don't want to be like hitting a load of this with a couple of bags initially and then find, oh, it is actually pulling in, and I'll put on too much that I can handle. So that's why I'm just going to nip off this along with the regular plasterboard to see exactly how that's going to go, and then judging on how this goes will give me an indication of how much of this other stuff I can start picking up in a single hit before I have to start turning around and getting back on it before I get in trouble. So let's do that, shall we? Let's get started. Okay, so we did exactly what I said we'd do, and coming back to the beginning, yeah, it's picking up a tiny bit, but nowhere near ready to lay down, because as you can see, it's sticking to my finger, and I was just a hawkful short, almost got it, so I had to quickly knock up hawkful just to finish this little bit on there, but it's basically the same gauge, because I did mix it with the dirty water. There's a little bit, but this is where we got to, so that was just literally just a bag and like a hawkful or two just to get this bit on. And at the moment, I can't feel that picking up too fast at all. Right, let's get this all back and flattened in and under control. Little lump there, let me get him out. Okay, so we are all flattened in with the first coat in here. And I've come onto this SB hardwall, and to be honest with you, I can't notice any real difference at all. If anything, it's holding back more than the plasterboard. This is picking up, but it's still, as you see, it's sticking to fingers, too wet to put a second coat on. So what I'm probably going to do is just knock up and push on that little bit harder. And considering that is just plasterboard, and that is the only plasterboard wall we've got left in here, isn't it? Yeah. I might probably put the dirty water in the bucket, wash this round with some fresh water, knock up just about enough just to get that one wall on, which is easy, look, just a couple of sockets on it, and then if I've got anything left over, which I probably will do, I'll start picking up some of these awkward little reveals, which literally are going to be virtually nothing. Well, I've got another set of reveals there, that's it. On here, he said he's going to be putting frames in afterwards with some sort of architrave, which is going to come right round. I don't know exactly what he's doing, but I said, do you want me to put beads on it? He said, no, just finish that and I'll sort them out. Okay then. Okay, so we did exactly what I said we'd do, and I've got quite a lot. large mount is out of Hawkful left over. So we've got this on. That window is annoyingly small. I'm about to use the toe of the trowel to get that on, and that wasn't much better either. Coming back to where we started. Now if we touch this now look, it's not really coming off, it's not pimpling like it did before. Look, that's how it pimpled before. Now I can touch it, look, it's not really doing it. So it's just about ready to put the second coat on. And this is the one that we have just put on, but remember we put a little bit of dirty water in there, and look, that's what it's doing, it is pimpling. So what I might do is just mix back into this with some fresh water and mix up enough. Do you know what, this SBR wall, look, it's wetter than the plain old plasterboard wall. That SBR in one coat has killed that suction right back. Well, it's a little bit more gone there, might just be a bit thicker there for some reason. Yeah, look at these little pimples. So, yeah, it's gone off a bit more there. Maybe, like I say, it's a bit thinner. These walls in here, with the timbers being a timber property, timber building, it's going to bend around a little bit. So, yeah, right, let's mix this back, and we'll probably just knock up a couple of hawfuls, just enough to get that first bucket full down. It's not going to be even half a bucket. Remember, whatever the amount is that you mixed up to put on your first coat, then generally it's going to be about half as much again to put the second coat on. So if you knock up 2 bags, put the first coat on, it's going to be one bag, to put the second coat on. It gets confusing, doesn't it? But it's not, it's easy, it's easy. Okay then, so the second coat has gone on, and you can see it's gone on a lot neater. I haven't turned back around to flatten this in, this is how I have put it on, but again, with that trowel, I haven't mentioned it today, it's the... Anyway, so with that trowel, it does get things quite flat quite quickly, because it's such a large span. So, second coat is on here. I've got this left on my hawk, and that left in my bucket. So now let's come and check this out, which was on the second bucket of first coat, and look, it's almost there. It's pretty good. That's where we was touching it before. Now look, but there's a little bit of time, a little bit of play in there. So if that had pulled in a lot quicker, then I think, oh, do you know what? I need to knock that back and get the second coat on this now. But because it's hanging around a little bit, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get back and flatten this in straight away. And then as soon as I've done that, then I'm going to mix around again in here with some fresh water. Keep this clean, keep this dirty water that I'm going to create with the fresh water. Wash that bucket around, and I'm going to knock up just enough just to get the second coat on this wall over here. Okay, let's see if we can get some action shots with the bit boring otherwise, isn't it? Just showing what I did do. Just coming back to you every time. So look, this large trowel, because it's so straight, see that's a nasty little hard lump. I've got hard lumps coming from somewhere. Because I've laid down so tight, even though it's a tiny little lump, I can't bury it. Get that out. If you find any little hard lumps like that, you're better off getting them sooner rather than later, because if you leave it to the end, then, you know, the plaster is set so much, when you gouge it out, the little lump, you haven't got the material that's around the same sort of life, so you'll end up filling it with fat or something, and then it will notice, because there'll be a discoloration where it was, and then your customer quite likely will see that little thing, and it might be as flat as anything, but it's still going to catch his eye and it's going to rub his fingers over it, isn't he? So basically, you know, I want it all to look good, because that's what gives people the confidence that it is quite good plastering. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can have tiger stripes and stuff and it can look terrible and discoloured, and then actually by the time you paint it, it looks fine. So, like, as you can see, we're getting a little bit of build up now on the trowel. use that now, put that on this side here, and of course coming into these internals. So I don't ever use a corner trowel, and this is why, because I can tidy them up really well with this large trowel. Now this trowel is quite straight. Now if this was a curved trowel, especially at this length, you would not be able to do that as easy at all, because the toe and the heel will be digging in. If you've got a shorter trowel, then maybe the curve won't be so bad over the whole length of the trowel, so you might get away with it. But if you're using something like a perma-shaped trowel, which is normally, I know they do perma-shaped flats now, but I think you can only get them in 14 inches. But yeah, if you are using a curved trowel, then more than likely you will need to be using a corner trowel to sort these out. But I like to be pretty simple and just not have any more tools than what I need, you know. Clipped a little bit up. It's quite important as well. I always make quite a big deal about getting right into these internals up there, right into the corner, so you haven't got a little gap. Make sure you feel that good. So obviously the difference here is where we did ceiling yesterday, we have a hard edge to work to, you know. Some people find that easier. I personally, because I'm using the trowel, do like a live edge, because I can manipulate both sides. I can go obviously this side and I can come this side. And I find by having both sides alive, again, it helps me get that internal really, really quite straight indeed. Of here, this is where we can fly across because it's a big, well, it's not particularly that big, is it? It's a small bathroom, but it's a nice open space. And of course, keeping your wall, your plaster in a good shape early on, you know, it gives us a big window of opportunity to leave it alone, you know, because this is real tidy now, so we don't really have to come back to it. If I'd left this and pushed on and let these walls pick up with the ripples in them that you just saw, then when I do actually come to flatten them in at a later stage, it's going to be a lot harder because the plaster's going to be a lot stiffer, you know. And this is where you might start getting issues with your elbow, joints, you know, knuckles in your hand. And again, this is why I quite like using this large trowel, and it's why I can get away with it, because I get everything kind of under control really early on in the plaster's life, when it's quite wet, when it's easy to do so. Like I say, some people like to use speed rules, skim rules. If I do use one, it is solely because I need the time, because it might be a big ceiling or something. But if I do use one, I will use one with a metal blade. I don't ever use plastic or rubbery blades, especially at this edge, because people go, oh look how flat it is. It's not that flat, to be honest with you. What's happened is it's smoothed it out. It hasn't really flattened anything. It's actually just rode over any discrepancies here. So this is why I quite like using a rigid trowel, because it makes me take note of where any bad trowel marks are, if the toe of the trowel's sticking in anywhere, or it you know, reveals hollows, little bowls, whatever. The problem we've got here on this edge here, where he's told us, because he hasn't got the frame in, he's cut the plasterboard and we've got the dry edge. What I should have done was just lick a little bit of SBR over the dry edge, because what's happening over this dry edge here, look, because what's happening is the plaster, the moisture has been sucked out of the plaster by the insides, this dry edge of the plasterboard, and that's setting it off a little bit faster than the rest of it. So as my trowel comes across, it starts picking up those hard bits and causes, well, it will stick to the trowel and makes it start to tear there. But yeah, you can quite easily pick up quite a stiff lump, and then once you go in here and then you've got a stiff lump stuck on your trowel and you come across here and then again you gouge a massive great big trough through the flat of your wall. And you don't really want that. Okay, I think I've waffled on a lot. Too much, just like usual. So I think I'm just going to put the camera down for a minute and do what I said. Just got the outside of the level 2 walls to do, to flatten in like this, and then I'm going to mix up with the dirty water in the bucket and get that last wall laid down. got a little bit left over on my hawk, and I've got that, which is nothing left in the bucket. So what I'm going to do is clean that bucket out, because that's kind of like come to the end of its gauge now. You know, we've got all this. It's all linked together. We're going to sit with this now until we knock up again for a fresh start. So that's why we need to clean that bucket out now, because if we leave it like that, it's going to be rock hard and even harder to get that cleaned out. So yeah, now's the time to get it clean, because yeah, we're going to start with fresh water again, straight from the beginning. Okay, so still sticking with the 20x5 carbon steel trowel, I have introduced a wet brush to the situation, and I tend to use one of these. I show them quite often. It's a Wicks cheap brush and it tapers out at the end, which is why I'm able to not to use a corner trowel, because I can use it really nicely as a tool to sort out internals as I go. Right, let's get you down on the floor and talk you through. Okay, so up to this moment in time, this has not seen any extra water, okay? So you can see we've got a clean trowel, pretty clean brush, and we're going to come at it in a systematic way, pretty much in the same way as you put the plaster on in the first place, and we're going to start flattening out. Now, with experience, you'll start to learn how much you can open the trowel up, the angle of the trowel. So look, just kind of coming off it, this is what I've got out of there already. Now this is kind of like all right to push back into the wall, because this is first time, okay? It's the first time we've taken a wet brush to this. You can feel there's plaster grains in it, the granules are in there, which is why we can use it to fill holes. And it's almost like putting a third coat on if you push it back in, okay? Now you'll notice as well, I don't throw water onto the wall. I brush it, which is probably one of the reasons I go for the cheaper, smaller brushes, because they take a lot of abuse, you know, over about time they start to flare up a little bit. If you can continuously keep brushing fresh plaster with it, and you're going to get build up plaster on it. So that's why I go for the cheaper ones, because I don't know, might last a couple of months or so before I need a new one, they start to flare up. So as you can see, we're working across just the top there, brushing this in as I go, and I can feel, and this is what comes with experience, you know, how much you can open the trowel up, the angle of the trowel, okay? Another little trick as well to reduce drag is not to come down sort of like at a right angle. You come down at a bit more of a bent angle, like a 45 degree there, you reduce the drag on the wall. And sometimes coming down square like that is another way of creating tiger stripes. The same, I just showed it in the previous video to this one. Throwing water on the wall, you get globules of water, you know, and when your trowel goes over them, it stretches them out and it weakens the plaster where there's a thick amount of water. And again, we can be getting back into tiger stripe. So as you can see, look, got this all the time. I've not washed the trowel off. I'm using what I've taken off and pushing it back in. So your kind of initial strike is to open the trowel up, plane it off, okay? You're using the blade of that trowel to really open it up and blade it off, and you're ripping, you might see little rip marks in it, and this is when, before you leave, move on to the next section, you flatten the trowel back in, and you push that gear back into it and close that surface back in. Have a little rip at it, open that trowel up, and then close it and push that residue back into the wall. And that is pretty much how to trowel up, and you continue doing this until the wall is done. And I'll show you what it's like when the wall is done. So you know, you don't really, you know, when you're a young fellow and everything, you might have the idea, you've got to really, you know, throw that trowel around and go at it as fast as you can, move fast, but you know, tidy and neat is speed. You know, when you start out, you'll be slow, and the other guys are more experienced than you. The more likely to have Mickey taken out of you. Look how slow you are, no, I've done this, I've done that. You know, there's always a big emphasis on how much plaster you can get done in a day, so that makes you the better plasterer, you know. But when it comes down to painting, you know, how good is it? So what you need to really do if you're learning to plaster, start taking your time a little bit more. Don't worry about being fast, not straight away. get nice and tidy, do it right, and speed will start happening all by itself. And then I used to teach martial arts quite a large period of my life. Up until, well, I started doing sort of martial arts seriously. I always used to do it as a kid, and then picked it up again in my very early 20s, and by sort of like 30, I refused to do the belts first of all, and I just wanted to go around. Anyway, cut long story short, I did do the black belt in the end, and I became an insured instructor with an affiliation. And you know, it's a bit like Karate Kid, you know. There's so many principles which you can apply to different situations in life. And again, learning martial arts or a musical instrument or something like that, quite often you'll be told, if you need to slow everything down, slow it down, concentrate on what you're doing, you know, get it right. Because if you don't get it right and you're doing it fast, it's really difficult to undo that muscle memory, that what you've learned how to do it, you know, fresh it around in it, you'll be doing it wrong, working harder, you know, work smarter, not harder. So this is why, you know, when you're doing martial arts and stuff, you'll have katas, you know, where you're doing the patterns and you concentrate on your movements like Tai Chi and stuff. Get them absolutely perfect, get them right, go right back to the beginning, go right back to the basics. You're never too good and too old you're never better than going back to the basics every now and again and reminding yourself of the movements you need to do. And let's say, I'm getting on now, 51. Last thing I want to be doing is getting myself in trouble and complaining myself and just running around trying to keep up with this massive amount of plastering that I've put on. And fatiguing, you know, towards the end of the day you're absolutely knackered because you've been sweating, your arms are killing you and everything. Now, if you want some longevity in your plastering career, learn to do it right, learn to get it done, get it straight, get it flat, when it's easy. Don't work hard, work smarter. So, working smarter and not harder. And here's the tip for today. Down here, look, on this wall, let me just show you so you can get your bearings where we are. Okay, so we're coming down pretty close to the floor, and the plaster is kind of picking up. It's a scene one trowel now. Don't matter how good you are, keep coming up and down, because we're coming down to the skirting line. You're going to curl that bottom out a little bit, and your carpenter is not going to like you if you leave them on there, because if that's gone hard, he's going to have to get a chisel this off, and it's not going to be as good. So whilst it's at this stage here, pliable, now is a good opportunity just to trim that back with your trowel. Of course, you can't really do that when it's wet, because next time you come down, you'll curl it out again, So timing is what's necessary for trimming those back. And of course, as you can see, look, they've come off. And we've not splurged all over the floor, okay? So they're at a point now where I can just leave them there until the wall's complete, and then they'll just sweep up nice easy. They're not stuck to the floor. Okay, if you are a regular to the channel, yes, I know, it's kind of annoying sometimes because I have to repeat myself so much, because if there's some sort of information that I don't put in a new video, and say somebody new is watching it, it will come up and I'll have to answer it in the comment section. So what we are going to do now, we're saying that one question comes up quite a lot is, well, you know, nobody ever gives timings. That's because you don't know. Timings are always different, depending on whether it's what the weather's like, what the surface is, okay? But generally, you're looking about 10 to 15 minutes between every sort of movement on the wall. And this is why you can stagger your gauge. Now, like I say, some plasterers might come in and they'll knock up 3 bags straight away. And then obviously it's really wet at the beginning, and towards the end they'll be, you know, struggling to get it down. And of course all the time that's all on one set, you know, and this is where you'll start suffering strain and fatigue. So this is why quite often you might be better off knocking up 3 separate bags. So knock up a bag, get a bag on, knock up another bag, get that bag on, knock up another bag, get that bag on, okay? Now, when that happens, you're moving around the room in the timing that wall is going off, okay? You're linking these chains up. So it's a bit of a false economy to think, all right, let's smash up a load of bags and just throw that lot on and just fight it. It might take a tiny little bit longer to break it up like that, and it might seem a little bit tedious, but after that, those guys have got, you know, 3 bags down, they're like, oh man, it's done me in. And you're fresh as a daisy because you've been working smarter, not harder. And you've got another 3 bags left in you, you know? So, you know, a bag should be about 10 meters. So 3 bags, if you're hitting around, you know, 25 to 30 meters, that's a lot to handle in one sort of sitting. And you get 2 of them on you, and you're on site and you're earning decent money on the meterage, then you're going to earn decent money hitting 60 meters, 50, 60 meters a day. That's pretty much what you need to get to. Now, what was I going to say in the first place before I started talking here? Right, timings. Now, these walls here, I'm getting the feeling I've only given them one trowel up with the carbon steel 20 by 5, and I'm feeling now, because I did lay these down quite tight, the second coat I've got them quite tight, and I managed to get them in a really good condition. So they've only had one visit from the 20 by 5 carbon steel trowel alongside a wet brush. Now normally I would give it 2, but I'm getting the feeling now, because this is what we're working on, feelings, use the force, you know, like Obi-Wan Kenobi. And yeah, I'm getting the feeling I'm going to switch to my other trowel, which I always do. So the 20 by 5 carbon steel is here. Now I'm switching to this stainless steel, which is really flexy. Can I bend it on so I can show you? You can see how flexy it is. Okay. Now the stainless steel is a lot softer, and the blades roll around a lot more. So we can use this to really close that surface in, and it'll close in quite a bit quicker than using one of the really rigid, rusty trowels, the carbon steels. So I quite like using it. And of course that is a big trowel again, so when you start getting into the later stages of the wall or whatever, then you'll do well to drop down to one of these because it's less strain on your arm, but again, because it's so flexible as well. Now the reason I can drop down to this flexible trowel and use it is because I have got it already flat at a really young age with that carbon steel trowel, okay? So that's what's got things flat. We haven't dealt with smooth to a certain degree, we've got things flat. This is what allows me to switch to this, because now everything's flat, now I can start concentrating on smooth and closing that surface in, and if you like, polishing it up. You cannot use this straight from the outset, because if there's any ripples, you know, if the bead's sticking out, the blade's so flexible it will curl that wall out. And this is actually what speed skimmers do as well, but on a, you know, not so severely, because obviously a speed skim rule is quite a bit longer. So this is why I can switch to this now. You cannot use these to put on with. Well, you can, but you can't slide down that wall and have a look at it afterwards, and you'll see the difference between using one of those carbon steel trowels and using one of these from the outset. And Plaziflexes, don't get me started on them. Right, it's all going off for me. Let me get back round and start troweling this up with the Refina Flex 2. 16-inch, by the way, stainless steel. Is timing. So it's all very well saying, oh yeah, take your time and everything, but of course time is moving forward all the time, and so is the condition of your wall. So when I say take your time and speed will come, I don't mean keep repeating the same action, especially with plastering, because what you'll do if you keep playing with the walls, there's something else you'll get pulled up for if you're an inexperienced plasterer or you're learning with somebody else. So stop playing with that wall. You know, you're going over it, the same bit, going over it. It's not changing, it's still staying the same. That's because we haven't got the intelligence, or at least the experience, to know now's not the time to do anything, because we need that to pick up a little bit. And if you keep playing with that plaster whilst it's in that wet condition, you'll start upsetting the granules in it, because with floor screeds, brick walls, plaster, coastal plaster, principle's the same thing, okay? You got big granules and you've got little granules in there, and you need an average spread of the big granules and the little granules together, so that they give it its strength, okay? So obviously a brick wall overlaps each other, you've got the mortar in between, that's pretty much exactly what's happening. But in here you'll have like tiny shards and then tiny little granules, and you need those shards to kind of overlap each other like bricks. Now, when it's in its wet state, when the plaster is manipulable, if you keep playing with it, you'll start upsetting the average of these shards, okay? And you'll keep pushing it, playing with it, and those heavier shards will start bumping into each other and locking together. And they'll kind of like sink more into the depth of the wall. And you keep playing with it, so these shards are banging together, they've locked together, all these big shards, they're all there. Then what's happened is all the little granules have pulled out to the top. And now this surface here, this is where it's lost its integrity because you've got no shards in it. And then all you've got is these tiny little granules. And this is what's causing more ripples and stuff. It's all blobby up there. And you know, if you ever like dampen down a tamper ballast, if you put your footings down, of course, when you pour that concrete into the hole, it's all lumpy because it's quite stiff and all the stones at the top. So you get your bit of wood and you just tamp it, and it just pats them down a little bit, and it brings up all the cement to the surface, which is fine because we're going downwards. Gravity is our friend. Here, gravity isn't our friend. Those will be coming out to the surface and they'll start to hang and droop in their wet state and cause ripples in the wall. So it's important to take your time, but also move efficiently across the wall and know when to do something and when to leave it. I think I've mentioned this before. Oh, by the way, this stuff that's coming out there now, so there's hardly any granules in it. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. We're playing with it. This can't be used anymore because it's just literally sludge. There's no granules in it. So yeah, I think I've mentioned this story before. I used to listen to quite a lot of Buddhist audio books. And I practiced it a little bit. And there's this one particular book I used to listen to. It was just an Australian guy called Brahm, who was a Buddhist. And it was just a book about different stories and fables and stuff, you know, just to prove a point. And one that sticks out in my mind is choosing when to do something and when not to do something. And it has been mentioned in Star Wars again, and I don't mind quoting a few bits of Star Wars. And Obi-Wan turns round to Qui-Gon and says, yeah, but Master Yoda always told me to be mindful of the future. And then Qui-Gon reminds him that yes, that's fine, but not at the expense of the present. Yeah? So like I say, doing the things at the right time is quite important, and recognising. So one of the stories was a platoon of soldiers found themselves completely surrounded by the enemy, and there was just a few of them now, and it looked like there was no way they were going to get out of it. So the boys said, right, look, we're going to cop it, let's go at them and go out fighting, yeah? And then the sergeant said, do you know what, look, we've still got those tea bags there. Before we do that, if we need to do that, let's all have a cup of tea. I assume that was the British Army, by the way, these soldiers. So yeah, they said, all right, you're right. He said, we'll have a cup of tea and we'll just wait for them to come to us, and we'll set up, you know, and we'll be able to take more of them out, if you like, because we'll have the element of surprise rather than just going at them all gung-ho, with guns blazing, and literally just running into, you know, machine gun fire, if you like. So they said, okay, all right, we'll do that, we'll have a cup of tea. So that's exactly what they did. And then what happened was, because they remained inactive, the enemy didn't notice them. And they remained undetected. And then the enemy passed around them because they stayed, if you like, hidden. And then they saw an opportunity where they could escape. And that's exactly what they did, they escaped. Because they chose their time. So take from that what you will, but yeah, I always quite like that story. complete. Now, like I can say, it's a wooden structure and we are contending with some bits and pieces here. You see the bend in that wall. Okay, a bit of a bend in there, so there's only so much you can do. So what did we get? We got the inside of all this, we got the outside of all that, and we picked off this one wall here which was plasterboard, and then this set reveals, and that little set reveals down there as well. So bearing in mind how that one SBR wall behaved, I'm going to guess that we can go for some meters now on this other stuff. So all we've got left is the SBR walls. So I'm going to knock up about a bag and a half or so, and I guess it's going to get me all that, and quite possibly all this down here as well. Aiming to finish off in this internal here, which leaves me obviously this fairly small hit to do. Let's do it all again. Bit of a pain in it. I've got what left in the bucket. It's a good fat hawkful, and that was pretty much a bag and a half. That went on quite big. This wall wasn't quite so bad. But look at this one. It is all over the place. There's some light in there, look. All these sporadic movements I've had to make. That is one thing about the 20x5. It really does force you to notice. I think combination of this wall being a bit wobbly with the timbers, and also the fact that it was plastered before. Of course, I've had to re-bead it. So I think what Matey's done is when he's already plastered it, the beads were scooping out already. So then I've had to put beads on top, which just scoops them out. So these areas around the beads are really quite thick. And I'm glad I knocked up the plaster a little bit chubby in the first place. Yeah, they're really deep. No, let me just clean that off. And we can see how deep that is. That's quite, it's like 5 mil. Okay, I was hoping to get it further than that, but yeah, that's eating it up. let's just turn around and flatten this in, and then maybe, because we've got quite a bit left over in there, we'll knock up just enough to get this extra wall on here. And because we've got quite a bit left over from the first gauge, it's going to have even more properties to send that next first coat and the next lot of plaster that we knock up. It's going to send it off a little bit faster as well, because it's obviously the percentage. If you put, 50%, if 50% of it's the old stuff, then it's going to go off quicker. If you only put like 5% of old stuff in it, then it's 95% is new stuff, then it's going to go off a bit slower. So it works like that. So we have just been across this wall again, and I mean, it's looking a lot better. No, it's difficult to show up on video, but I'm not sure if you can see here some of the depth. And let's see this here where it's kind of like, it's on the verge there. Let's see, it's kind of what I call pudding. See this one here? It's pudding out. That's where it's sagging underneath its own wet weight. Now, yeah, all right, I could have noticed that before I started, but to be honest with you, the whole wall's all over the place anyway. It's just on the limit, but yeah, I should have noticed it and I should have dubbed them out already, but don't worry, we can sort it out. Now, what's happening is we've got SBR on these walls, killing the suction. So that's making this depth hang even more. If we'd used PVA, like multiple coats of it, and got it down to just about the right amount of suction, then we could have like maybe turned around on this and flattened it in straight away, because it will start drawing out the moisture from the plaster, and if you like, sending it off that little bit quicker using the suction to speed up your hit of plaster that you've put on. Well, we ain't got that here. So what are we going to do with this? There's no point keeping that, because by the time this stiffens up, that's going to have stiffened up in there as well. It's going to go too far, so we can't really knock that back. To put the second coat on all this, because it's just going to go too far. So the only thing we can really do, because we've got SBR on the walls, is push forward. That's all we can do with it, really. Otherwise we're just going to be sitting there twiddling our thumbs. Now I dare say this is probably going to need a couple of flattens in, but there's no point in touching it now. This is like, again, having the experience to know when it's best to do nothing at all. And in this case, nothing at all is the best thing to do as far as that wall is concerned, because we're going to do that stuff of upsetting the particles in the depth of the wall, and those ripples are just going to get worse and worse and worse. So we need to let it go and let it pick up. So we need to fill our time if we're to be paid for being an efficient plasterer. So that is going to have to get knocked back, and let's get enough to get this last wall on. I was going to calm this video down as far as talking is concerned, and I was just going to play this out to some music and just go, oh yeah, look, we finished the room. But obviously, sometimes life has different plans for you, doesn't it? And this is one of those. Yeah. Can't force a situation, can you? All you can do is bend like a reed in the wind. Okay, so we pushed forward, and this is how this wall has gone on. I haven't turned back to flatten it in, so we can see, look, it's just a much nicer wall. It's gone on much more tidy. So I'm going to turn back and flatten this in now. Oh, what have we got left? Got that left in the bucket. This is hanging. No point in touching that for the moment. Although, feel it's picking up under its own speed. Anyway, but yeah, this is one, it's a positive and it's a drawback of using SBR, killing all the suction. Do we really want to do that? Depends on the situation, doesn't it? Now, I could, and I feel like I could, although I'm not going to do it, if I really, really wanted to pull or push the boat out, I reckon I could make that back again and get this last little section on, but I'm not going to do that because time is getting on, and plus I've got a load of prep to get on with it now. I haven't even touched that in there yet, so to finish off the day, instead of like pushing really hard and getting on with all this plastering, I'm just going to stick some beads and some scrims up, staple them up because they're going to be up for a little while, And then you can finish any time you want, you know. If you start another gauge, you know, you're in it for another 2.5, 3 hours. Like 3 hours if you've SPI'd and killed all the suction. If you'd only PVA'd, you know, it would go a lot quicker, but you'd have to break your gauges up a lot smaller. It's whatever you want, isn't it? 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Okie dokie, so this is pulled in a little bit, it's set a little bit, so pulling in. And just around these windows where I was getting that pudding effect where it was sagging under its own weight, I've just given it another little trowel over. Now it's kind of stiff enough now just to hold itself together a bit better. So now I think I can probably get away with getting a second coat over these. Although it's still, I think we just about get away with it. I want to knock up enough to get the whole thing laid down. And I've got this on my hawk here and I've got this in the bucket, so I am definitely going to be washing that around and using its properties to send this laying down coat off a lot quicker. I was going to be here all night. Okay, so we managed to get that all second coated and look, that's how it's gone on, really nice and neat. Again, now you know you've done something right with the first coat if your second coat goes on as regulated as that without even turning back to flattening. Now I really did dope that laying down coat up. It's going off in the bucket and it was like half a bag or so as it went on quite tight, and I struggled to get through half a bag. It was going off that quick. So what I really need to do is stop nattering on and clean this bucket out and turn back around, and I might even bring a wet brush to the situation in the first place rather than just flattening in it to put it in that quick. Yeah, okay, right, let's get cracking, shall we? Crikey, that was a long one, wasn't it? I don't know what was more tiring, actually doing that day or doing the editing. It's taken forever. I guess that's what happens when you're a plasterer and you're left alone with your own faults all day. Which is one of the reasons I think plasterers are a little bit weird. Same as painters, you know, because your brain's not really that occupied. You're just, you know, plastering away. You don't really have to think about plastering once you get to a certain level. And of course, your brain is just filled with all sorts of different thoughts and situations that pop in there. Same as painters. Although, you know, painters back in the day always seemed to be alcoholics to me. But also, I think because, you know, they used to drive around in their vans with a lot of thinners and stuff. So yeah, you see the painter get out of the van and yeah, all his hair sticking up. A little bit like Lloyd Bridges in the classic funny film Aeroplane. Yeah, sniffing thinners all day in their vans and stuff. So yeah, well, yeah, massive video, even without this little clip of me talking again on the end of it. So let's wrap this up well quick. We are back in there. It's Saturday. I'm back in there on Monday. I've got a couple of jobs to look at. I've been to look at one. first thing 8 o'clock this morning, and I've got to go and look at another one at 3 o'clock this afternoon, but you don't need to know that. We are going to finish up. Right, okay, thanks for watching. Don't forget the Facebook group Plaster Master Smurf 74, Plaster Master Smurf 74, should you want to come over there, engage with me and other plasterers in a little bit more of an intimate fashion. Right, nice one. Thanks for watching, take it easy, and I'll see you on the next video. I don't know when, won't be long. Alright, bye bye.